She tried to take my kids away, not because they were unsafe, not because of anything I had done, but because a bitter neighbor decided she had the power to destroy my family. She picked up the phone, made false reports, and thought she could bend the system to her will. What she didn't realize is that I'm a federal judge. She thought I was just another resident she could bully into submission. She had no idea that by targeting my children, she was stepping into a battle she could never win. It started small, the way it always does. A knock at my door. That fake, polite smile was plastered on her face. She called herself the head of the neighborhood committee. They knew better. She was the self-appointed queen bee. Let's call her Karen, because that's exactly who she was. Karen leaned against my porch railing. It's like she owned the place, and pointed out that my children's bikes had been left near the driveway overnight. She spoke with that slow, deliberate tone that wasn't about bikes at all. It was about authority. I brushed it off, thanked her, and moved the bikes. But I saw it in her eyes. She wasn't satisfied. She wanted control. The next week, she was back. This time it was about the chalk drawings my kids had made on the sidewalk. Smiling suns, little hopscotch squares. Karen leaned in close and whispered, "This isn't appropriate for our community image. Community image." She said it like she was talking about a country club. I laughed it off, but something deep in my chest told me this wasn't over. Now, let me tell you something about Karen. She wasn't the type to be ignored. Every time you dismissed her, every time you didn't bow down, she doubled her efforts. And sure enough, the following weekend, I caught her standing across the street with her phone out, taking pictures of my children while they played. That was the moment my stomach dropped. It's one thing to nag about bikes and chalk, but when you start documenting kids, my kids, that crosses a line you can't come back from. I walked across the street, calm but firm. "Karen," I said, "delete those photos." She smiled. That tight-lipped smile people wear when they know they're doing something wrong but don't care. She said, "If your children are going to keep breaking the rules, then the HOA has every right to keep records." Records. That word stung. She wasn't keeping records. She was building a case. And I wish I could tell you I was overreacting. Paranoid. But less than 2 weeks later, I found out exactly what she was planning. It was a Tuesday afternoon when I got a knock at the door, not from Karen this time, but from Child Protective Services. My kids were inside, watching cartoons, and I opened the door to 2 agents holding clipboards and serious faces. They told me they'd received an anonymous complaint. Neglect. Unsafe environment. Possible emotional harm. I felt my blood boil, but my voice stayed steady. "Come in," I said. "You're going to want to see this for yourselves." The agents walked through the house. They saw the stocked fridge, the clean bedrooms, and the half-finished puzzle on the dining table. They talked to my children, who laughed, and showed them their favorite toys. In the end, the agents looked almost embarrassed. They knew there was nothing here, but the damage was already done. Someone had tried to use the system against me, to use the state to rip my children out of my arms, and I didn't need a detective to tell me who it was. Karen underestimated me. She thought I'd be scared. She thought I'd panic. What she didn't know was that she had just set herself on a collision course with the wrong person. I've presided over federal cases. I've seen the depths people will sink to when they want to control others. But to have it happen in my own neighborhood, on my own street, targeting my kids that hit different, I couldn't confront her yet, though. Not directly, because she wanted me to lash out. She wanted me to lose my temper so she could play the victim. So instead, I documented everything. I saved her notes. I recorded her confrontations on my porch. I even asked neighbors quietly if she'd been talking about me, and, sure enough, several admitted she had been spreading rumors. She wasn't just targeting me. She was trying to isolate me, turn the whole neighborhood against my family, and here's where it got worse. Late one night, around midnight, I heard a noise outside. At first, I thought it was just the wind. But when I looked out, I saw Karen standing at the edge of my driveway, just standing there, no phone, no dog, no reason.
"Oh, just staring at my house."
The porch light caught her eyes, and for a second, I swear I saw satisfaction on her face, like she was watching and waiting for me to crack. Now, imagine how you'd feel in that moment. Imagine putting your kids to bed, tucking them in, and then realizing someone is outside, someone who wants to destroy your family, wouldn't you feel rage boiling in your chest? Wouldn't you feel fear crawling up your spine? I stood there, gripping the window frame so hard my knuckles went white. And I promised myself this ends with me, not with my children. But here's where the story takes a turn you won't see coming.
Oh.
Because while she thought she was building her little case against me, I was building one against her. Let me tell you, when you're a federal judge, you know how to gather evidence the right way. You know how to make sure every piece lines up, every lie gets exposed, and every truth cut sharper than a knife. The problem was, she didn't stop. In fact, she escalated. She filed complaints with the HOA about everything. My trash cans were 2 inches too close to the curb, my lawn wasn't green enough, and my kids laughed too loudly outside. Every complaint came with a fine. Every fine came with a threat. And every threat was delivered with that same smug grin. But I stayed calm, because I knew where this was going. Then came the day everything boiled over. My kids were in the front yard, laughing, playing tag. Karen stormed over, phone in hand, screaming that she was calling the police because my children were disturbing the peace. Can you imagine? Children playing in their own yard, disturbing the peace? Wife rushed out, trying to shield the kids. Neighbors gathered, phones came out. And suddenly, it wasn't just another HOA spat. It was a full-blown showdown in the middle of the street. Karen yelled about community standards and violations. I stood there silent, letting her words hang in the air, because I knew that in that moment, everyone could see the truth. She wasn't protecting the neighborhood. She was targeting a family. She was targeting children. And if you think this is the end of the story, think again. Because the moment I finally revealed who I was, when I finally let her know that I wasn't just a dad defending his kids. A federal judge who understood the law better than she could ever dream of it changed everything. But I'll get to that. For now, understand this. The battle wasn't just about rules. It wasn't about bikes or chalk or trash cans. It was about power, and Karen thought she had it. But what she didn't realize is that she'd already lost. So let me ask you, if you were in my shoes. If a neighbor tried to take your children away, how far would you go to protect them? Would you fight back? Would you gather every shred of proof, every piece of evidence, and prepare to expose them for what they are? Because that's exactly what I did. And you need to stick around to see how this all exploded, because trust, Mitha, ending is nothing like what you think. And before we go any further, I want you to take a second and think about what you'd do if someone tried this with your family. Drop your thoughts below. I want to hear them. And make sure you watch until the very end of this story, because every twist and every turn is about to unravel right before your eyes. You want to know the worst part about being targeted? It isn't the complaints. It isn't the notes, the fines, or even the late-night staring contests from across the street. It's the uncertainty. The way you start second-guessing every move you make. The way your kids hesitate before riding their bikes, asking, "Dad, is Karen going to be mad at us again?" That's what cuts the deepest, not her lies, but the shadows she cast over my family's peace. But Karen wasn't satisfied with shadows. She wanted to drag us into the light, expose us in front of everyone. She picked her moment carefully. It was a Saturday morning. My wife was gardening. My kids were chasing each other on the grass, and I was enjoying my first sip of coffee when the sirens cut through the air. 2 squad cars rolled down the street, stopping right in front of my house. Doors swung open. Officers stepped out, and suddenly my yard was a crime scene. Neighbors peeked out their windows, cell phones came out, whispers spread like wildfire, and there was Karen, standing on the sidewalk, arms crossed, smirk plastered on her face like she had just summoned the cavalry. She called them. She really called the police on children playing in their own yard? The officers approached, hands resting near their belts but not yet tense. "Sir, we received a noise complaint and a report of possible child endangerment." Child endangerment? That word hit me like a punch to the gut. It wasn't just noise anymore. She had escalated it to a full-blown accusation. I took a deep breath. I had 2 choices in that moment. I could explode, Let my anger consume me in front of my children, my neighbors, and the police. Or I could do what I've trained myself to do for years in the courtroom. Stay calm, stay controlled, and let the truth dismantle the lie. So I smiled. Officers, would you like to come inside and see for yourselves? They looked at each other, then back at me, and one of them nodded. We walked through the house again, just like I had with CPS. They saw the books, the toys, the family photos. On the walls, they spoke to my kids, who told them they were just playing tag. And once again, the truth was undeniable. There was nothing here, nothing but a neighbor with an axe to grind. When the officers left, Karen tried to shout something about rules and order, but no one was listening anymore. Neighbors who had once avoided eye contact with me now looked at her with suspicion, because the more she pushed, the more her mask began to crack. But let me tell you, Karen wasn't done. If anything, the failure made her more dangerous. People like her, when cornered, don't back down. They doubled down. And that's exactly what she did. Over the next few weeks, letters started appearing in my mailbox. Anonymous, of course, but I recognized the style. The same clipped phrases, the same obsession with community image. The letters accused me of everything from letting my kids damage property to being unfit to represent the neighborhood. At one point, I even suggested I was harboring violent tendencies. It was laughable, except it wasn't, because every lie she put on paper was one more seed of doubt she tried to plant. And then came the meeting, the infamous HOA meeting. Now, if you've never been to one of these, let me paint the picture. A room filled with folding chairs, a table at the front, a few people with clipboards acting like they're running a Fortune 500 company, and in the middle of it all Karen, sitting tall, papers stacked neatly in front of her like she was preparing to deliver a closing argument in court. Except she didn't realize who she was really up against. I sat quietly in the back with my wife. I wanted to see how far she would go when she thought she had an audience. And sure enough, she stood up and began her performance. She talked about declining neighborhood standards. She spoke about families who refuse to respect community rules. And then without naming me directly, she began listing examples. Bikes left outside, jock drawings, children screaming. At all hours, every word dripped with venom. Every accusation was meant to isolate me, to shame my family, to paint us as outsiders. I could feel my wife's hand gripping mine, her nails digging into my skin. And for a moment, I felt the anger rise. I wanted to stand up right there and end it, but I didn't, because sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is wait. Karen finished her speech, looking around the room with smug satisfaction. She expected applause. She expected agreement. But instead, there was silence. And then, one brave neighbor raised their hand. "Karen," they said, "aren't you talking about the judge's family?" Her face twitched. Just for a moment, but it was enough. Because in that room, people started whispering. They remembered the police showing up for nothing. They remembered the CPS visit. They remembered the stories Karen had been spreading. And suddenly, her campaign didn't look like leadership. It looked like obsession. I could have stood then. I could have revealed everything, every lie, every photo, every midnight stalking. But I didn't. Not yet. Because I knew the more rope she had, the more she would hang herself. The next day, though, Karen escalated again. This time, she filed a formal petition with the HOA board demanding disciplinary action against my family. She wanted fines. She wanted restrictions. And she wanted the board to pressure me into compliance. But here's the thing, she still didn't know who I was. To her, I was just another dad, another easy target, and that ignorance was about to become her downfall. Because when I finally responded, I didn't just respond as a father. I responded as someone who knows the law inside and out. I drafted a letter, formal, precise, and devastating. I cited statutes, I referenced rights, and I outlined every instance of harassment my family had endured. And I sent copies to every single board member. The silence that followed was deafening. Karen tried to spin it, of course. She claimed I was intimidating the board. She claimed I was overreacting. But the damage was done. The board members began distancing themselves from her. Neighbors started looking at me with sympathy instead of suspicion. The tide was turning, but Karen wasn't finished. No, her obsession had gone too far. When people like her feel power, slipping from their grasp, they do something desperate, something reckless. And that's exactly what she did. Late one evening, as I was tucking my kids into bed, I heard shouting outside. I rushed to the window and saw Karen in my driveway, screaming into her phone. Words like dangerous, unstable, and threat to the community carried through the night air. My kids froze. My wife looked at me with fear in her eyes. For the first time in this entire ordeal, I realized we weren't just dealing with harassment anymore. We were dealing with someone who was willing to burn everything down just to win. And that's when I knew the time for patience was over. Time for silence was done. It was time for Karen to learn the truth. But before I tell you how I revealed everything, and the shock that followed, I want you to pause for a second. Imagine someone standing outside your home shouting lies about you while your kids are trying to sleep. Imagine your neighbors watching, whispering, unsure of what's real. Would you stay calm? Would you wait for the right moment? Would you snap? Because trust me, what happened next changed everything. And you're not going to want to miss it. So stick with me until the end, because this story is about to take a turn Karen never saw coming. And tell me, if you were in my shoes, how far would you go to protect your family? Drop your answer below. You can push a family only so far before the line gets drawn. And that night, when Karen stood in my driveway, screaming lies into her phone, that line was crossed. My kids were crying, the wife was shaking with rage, and the neighbors, they stood there in silence, watching the spectacle, torn between disbelief and exhaustion. Everyone knew it had gone too far, but no one knew just how far I was about to take it. I stepped outside, calm but firm, and walked straight toward her. Her eyes lit up, not with fear, but with triumph. She thought she had finally broken me. She thought I was about to give her the meltdown she had been baiting for months. But instead, I looked her dead in the eyes and said, "Karen, it's time you learned who you're really dealing with." She scoffed, rolling her eyes. "What? You think you're special? You think you're above the rules?" And that's when I dropped the truth. "I'm a federal judge." The words hung in the air like thunder. For the first time, I saw her smile falter. For the first time, her confidence cracked. The neighbors gasped. Phones that had been recording lowered just a little, and Karen, she stammered, tried to laugh it off, but her voice shook. You're lying." I pulled out my ID. No theatrics, no yelling. Just the simple, undeniable truth staring her in the face. And in that moment, her entire empire of lies came crashing down. But here's the thing. This wasn't just about scaring her. This wasn't about winning an argument. This was about protecting my children. This was about sending a message that enough was enough. I told her, calmly and clearly. "You've filed false reports. You've harassed my family. You've spread lies through this community. And now, Karen, there are consequences. Real consequences." She tried to backpedal. She tried to spin it as a misunderstanding, claiming she was only doing her duty for the neighborhood. But it was too late. I had documented everything, every letter, every complaint, every late-night photo and video. And when I said the words harassment and defamation, I saw her face drain of color. Because deep down, she knew I wasn't bluffing. The neighbors began to murmur louder this time. Some shook their heads. Others openly asked her, "Why would you do this?" The spotlight she craved had finally turned against her. But Karen wasn't one to surrender gracefully. She shouted, she cried, she accused me of abusing my power. But the louder she got, the clearer it became. She was unraveling. Every neighbor watching could see it. That night, after she stormed back to her house, I sat my family down. I looked my children in the eyes and told them, "You are safe. No one is taking you away. Not now, not ever." My wife hugged me so tightly I could barely breathe. And for the first time in months, I saw relief in their faces. But I also knew it wasn't over yet. It's not until Karen faced real accountability. So I filed. Not with the HOA, not with the police. I filed in court, a restraining order for harassment. A defamation claim backed by every piece of evidence I had collected. And when the summons arrived at her door, she finally realized this wasn't just a neighborhood spat anymore. This was real. This was legal. And this was something she couldn't talk her way out of. The court date came quickly.
Karen walked
In, shoulders stiff, lips pursed, clutching a binder full of nonsense she thought would save her. She expected sympathy. She expected the judge to see her as a victim, but instead, she walked into my world, a courtroom where truth doesn't bend to theatrics, where evidence outweighs gossip, where lies crumble under the weight of facts. And for once, she wasn't the one in control. The judge, not me, but a colleague, listened patiently as she spun her web of half-truths and accusations. And then, one by one, my attorney laid out the facts. The photos of her lurking outside my house at midnight, the police and CPS reports that showed no wrongdoing, the testimony from neighbors who had seen her obsessively targeting my family. Piece by piece, her story collapsed. By the end, she wasn't standing tall anymore. She wasn't smirking. She was slouched in her chair, eyes darting to the floor, mumbling about misunderstandings. But the court wasn't buying it. The restraining order was granted. Damages were awarded. And Karen left that courtroom not as the self-proclaimed queen of the neighborhood, but as a cautionary tale. Back in the neighborhood, things changed. The same neighbors who once whispered now came to me with support. They apologized for not stepping in sooner. They told me they admired the way I had handled it, not with rage, but with patience, with evidence, with truth.
Oh, my children could
Play outside again without fear. My wife could garden in peace. And Karen, she kept her distance. The restraining order made sure of that. But here's what I want you to understand. This story isn't just about me. It isn't just about one Karen or one neighborhood. It's about the way power corrupts when left unchecked. It's about the danger of letting lies spread without challenging them. And most of all, it's about what happens when someone threatens the one thing you love more than anything else, your family. Because let me tell you, there is no force on earth stronger than a parent's love. There is no law more powerful than the instinct to protect your children. And when someone tries to take that away from you, you fight with everything you have. So let me ask you, what would you have done? Someone tried to use the system to rip your kids away. Would you have stayed silent? Or would you have fought back with every ounce of strength you had? I want to hear your thoughts. Drop them below. And if you've made it this far, I need you to do one thing. Stay with me until the end. Because stories like this aren't just entertainment, they're warnings. They're lessons. They're reminders that sometimes the people smiling at you across the street are the same people sharpening knives behind your back. Karen thought she could destroy me. She thought she could use lies and fear to tear my family apart. But she underestimated one thing: the truth always wins. And in the end, that truth didn't just protect my children. It exposed her for who she really was. So the next time someone tells you to just let it go, remember this. Letting it go is how bullies win. Standing your ground calmly, firmly, and with proof, that's how you win. That's how you protect the people you love. And as for Karen, well, let's just say the neighborhood hasn't heard much from her since. So what about you? Have you ever dealt with a neighbor who crossed the line? Have you ever had to stand up and fight when you were pushed too far? Share your story, I want to hear it. And if you want more stories like this, make sure you stick around. Because trust me, this isn't the last time an HOA thought they had all the power.